Okay. Call the meeting order today, special meeting Wednesday, May 18th, City Hall room 404. It's 9:10 room and to discuss the discuss funding with Foster and Foster. Roll call.
Higgins.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Tar, here. Tomlin.
Present.
And President Trujillo.
Here.
We have a quorum present. Others present are Steve Morris, the city treasurer, Jason Franken from Foster and Foster, and Josh Martin. Did I get everybody?
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, and Trina Bonds, chief deputy city clerk.
All right, a moment of silence for remembrance of those firefighters who lost their lives while serving in the community. All right, thank you. Item 1, Jason, discuss fire pension funding with Jason Franken from Foster and Foster.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're here today to discuss the pension funding. And I have a tool here that I will be using throughout the presentation. What this tool is, it's a projection of the pension, the fire pension fund based on the January 1st, 2020 actuarial valuation. So we will be completing the 2022 valuation here in the coming months. But from a timing perspective, we did this based on the 2021 valuation. And there's several variables on the left side of this that I will be changing throughout the presentation. And then in the middle of the page, we have the estimated city contribution. This contribution currently, what you're seeing on the screen, is based on the city's approach of funding the statutory minimum amount. And that is looking to achieve a 90% funded ratio by the year 2040. And so you can, as you can see, the contributions, the current contribution is about 12 million. By 2040, it's going to increase to about $28 million for the fire pension fund. This does not include anything with the police, obviously, but the police would have a similar arc here. And then the bottom half shows you the estimated funded ratio. Currently the plan is about 49% funded, and you'll see that based on this contribution schedule, it gets to that 90% funded ratio at the end of 2040, at the beginning of 2041. And so, like I said, this is really the current situation that the fire pension fund faces. Off to the left side, I do have some contributions and net cash flows. I might look, reference this a little bit over time, during the presentation, but you'll see that between now and 2060, the city would have to make almost $500 million of contributions to the fire pension fund. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is really this current situation. We are funding to 90%, so we aren't amortizing the entire unfunded liability. So that causes a problem. It creates a situation where your unfunded liability is going to grow over time because the contributions are not large enough to cover the new benefits that are being accrued, plus the interest on the unfunded liability of the plan. And so I do have a table of numbers here. The current situation, you'll see that in 2021, we have about almost $160 million of unfunded liability. The good news is that we've had several years of strong investment returns. And we smooth those gains over a 5-year period. So we have a lot of unrecognized investment gains that are going to help the plan in the next few years. And you can see that if you look at the unfunded liability, it's at almost $160 million this year. Over the next 5 years, it actually does go down, as we recognize those investment gains. Unfortunately, so far this year the markets have not been great. And so, we're eating into a lot of those investment gains right now. I mean, hopefully we have some recovery before the end of 2022, and we don't eat into as much of those investment gains as we've seen in the first 5 months of 2022. But keep in mind, this goes back to 2021. So we do have 5 years of investment gains that are going to help us. But then you'll see that your unfunded liability, starts to grow for a handful of years before it goes down. And the reason is because of that, what's called negative amortization, that I mentioned a few minutes ago, where the payments aren't large enough to cover the interest on the unfunded liability, plus the new benefits that are being earned. So in the next, other than the investment gains that we have out currently, this contribution pattern is not designed to increase or decrease your unfunded liability much at all in the short term. And if I'm going to change some investment returns, so it looks like in 2021 you had about 8%, and so far I'm just going to estimate that the plan has lost 10%, in 2022. If I go back, you'll see, well, we do have some investment gains. And that creates a new blue line on the graph. So this blue line is what shows you the impact of those returns, rather than the 6.75% that we were assuming. We got 8% last year. We're getting -10 this year. You'll see now our unfunded liability goes down in 2022 because we had 8% return. But then that -10%, you'll see our unfunded liability is back to 159, 160, 164, 70, 176. So just based on where we are today, just updating the snapshot that we had in 2021, you'll see that in 2027, we're now estimated to have $176 million of unfunded liability rather than $147 million, that we were expecting in 2021. So the investment returns from year to year obviously have a significant impact on the plan. Next, one thing that I do want to talk about is we're going through the process of consolidation. I believe your money, has been transferred to the consolidated fund. And the good news is that you will now have opportunities to invest your money in investments that were not available to you before, just based on the law change. And so as a result, the expectation of the rate of return, probably is a little bit higher than what we've been using in that 6.75%. The consolidated fund adopted a rate of 7.125%. So that's what they think that they'll be able to earn over the long term. So if we just look at the 7.125%, you'll see that new blue line is actually lowering our contribution requirements over time. And the reason that happens is we have a higher rate of return. So we're assuming more investment income. So that takes less contributions from the city. And so that's going to lower our contributions over time. So if I just go look at over the next 40 years, there's about a $36 million reduction in the city's contribution based on that higher investment return. Obviously, we don't know if we're going to get 7.125. If we don't, well, then the difference, then we're that difference will go away or be reduced. It could be more, but as a result of the consolidation and that higher investment return, we would expect that there would be slightly higher returns. And that is going to, that's going to help the city over time. Okay, going back to sort of our base case, there has been proposals out
Can I
there.
ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So help me understand what is better, or what opportunities are out there after the consolidation that weren't available before the consolidation?
You'd like private equity investments, those types of things. Plus, there's not the restrictions. You could have more in equities, there's more opportunities for these investments that traditionally return higher, that have higher returns than what you were allowed. I mean, as a fund your size, you had a lot of opportunities in toward, you could put up 65% in equities. You didn't have the same restrictions that some of the smaller plans had, but there are more opportunities, from that perspective. That's one. The other
For the
thing is,
consolidated fund overall, there's more opportunities. right?
Yes.
But, okay, so what, I guess what I'm struggling with is before the consolidation, there was an opportunity for the local fund to make changes or address needs on a more immediate basis. And it seems to me that the consolidation so far hasn't been a very timely or attentive situation, not compared to what it was when we had local control. So that's a concern. So I guess I'm wondering, when I hear that there's more opportunities and better opportunities, and especially when it's put in the context of the opportunity for the city not to have to contribute as much, that concerns me. I don't see that. That's a.
well, they have,
Understand
the city is on the, they're on the hook to pay the pensions, and so.
Okay, but when this group that we're going to be talking to today hears that comment, that idea is going to be stuck in their mind. So I want to understand from my perspective and having to deal with them long-term. I want to be careful of saying something like that, but I want to be able to explain it as very much an if. And it, I think that's something we have to be cautious about. It's an if. So far, the consolidation hasn't, to me, it's been like anything else where the state comes in and a bigger bureaucracy takes over. It hasn't been as responsive. And while
What do you mean?
overall the consolidated fund has more opportunities, this fund, I think, was doing okay. It was the city's lack of consistent contribution. It wasn't the members.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah, so no, but all I'm saying is that's the intent of the consolidation, is to provide, one, additional investment opportunities that, some of those they could have provided, especially for the smaller plans, because there was severe restrictions and some plans could only have up to 10% in equities. That didn't make any sense. They could have given, a lot of that opportunity, those investment opportunities, just by changing the law. But that change, that opportunity to change was really, a bargaining chip that they had. Like, well, we'll remove these restrictions only if you go through consolidation. So, that's definitely part of it. But there are those, like I said, private equity, those type investments that are now available that, in the most part, weren't available to funds in the past. The other thing is that it will reduce.
Lost your audio.
Can you hear me? We're gonna have the loop.
Yes, now. Audio is out again.
Okay.
You seem to be back.
Yeah, but we have a loop though. Okay, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, Matt, okay.
You got it about audio?
Matt, audio? Yes? Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right, sorry for the technical difficulties here. Your question okay for now? Okay. So the biggest issue with the 90% approach, as you can see, it leads to significant increase in the city's contribution over time. You know, it goes from 12 million to 28 million in the next 20 years. And a better approach, still not perfect, but a better approach is to fund that entire unfunded liability. And if we had an 100% target, you'll see your contribution, and for everyone that's on the pension board, this is the approach that we've been doing the independent actuarial evaluation based upon, the 100% by 2040. So we are showing a contribution that's significantly larger than the statutory minimum, about $3 million per year larger for your plan. The city has not been contributing that amount. They've been contributing the statutory minimum, but you'll see that if we had that higher amount, then we could pay less in the future. Pensions are pay now or pay later, and when you're paying more now, the savings, you save a whole lot in contributions over time. And if I just look at the total contribution difference under the statutory minimum, the city's going to be paying 492 million. Under the approach to getting to 100% by 2040, it's just under 450. So a $43 million decrease to the city's contribution over the next 40 years. That's $1 million per year of savings if we were funding to 100% by 2040 rather than the 90% by 2040. Another thing that's part of this the pension code is that we're using a level percentage of a payroll approach. And that's what leads to what's called that pension ramp you probably heard about. That's the increase in the statutory amount. That's because of this level percentage of payroll, that the contributions are designed to increase over time. And currently the assumption is 3.5%. So we're showing payments that are increasing at 3.5% per year. If we just lower that to 2.5%, you'll see that there's not a lot of change, but it does increase the current contribution a little bit and lowers the contribution down the road. Obviously, if we lower it more, and I'll go all the way to 0%, just to give you an idea, again, it takes more money now to save, money down the road. You make a higher contribution today, and you're going to be allowed to make lower contributions in the future, because when you make those higher contributions, you get the benefit of the compound interest, right? You put that money in the plan, it's earning, it's multiplying based on the compound interest. If you defer your payments like you are under the statutory, you're not earning compound interest. In fact, you're paying compound interest. Einstein, is his eighth wonder of the world or whatever, what says that, that says that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it earn it, and those who don't pay it. And by deferring the contributions, like under our current approach, the city is really paying, that compound interest rather than earning it. And, you compound over 50, 60 years, that ends up being a considerable amount of money. So this payroll growth, this level percentage of payroll, a pension ramp, that's another issue. And that's why, one of the reasons why we're seeing this huge increase over time is because of that pension ramp that's deferring the contributions. Okay. The one, one of the big issues with the Illinois pension code is that the contributions right now are way too low. Like I've said, the current contributions are too low. We have negative amortization. That unfunded liability is designed to increase over time. These contributions are way too low. But on the flip side, these contributions in 2030s, the late 2030s, are way too high. There's nothing magical about the year 2040, nothing at all. And why are we, we've just set an arbitrary deadline that creates a contribution pattern that is impossible. It seems very unlikely to me that the city's going to be able to increase their contributions from 12 million to 28 million over the next 20 years. And so why do we have this? Well, I think it was put there due to politics. They say, well, we're going to be 90% funded by 2040. Yeah, good luck with that, right? I mean, there's no way.
Well, then that comes to that point. At 2038, you got a 20% loss in the market. You got 2 years to make it up.
Yes.
And that's an unrealistic.
Yeah. So let's just show that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make these all. Okay. So we're back to that same situation. Let's go to 2038, and you have minus 20%. Well,
Yeah.
What is that? That contribution goes from 34 million to goes from 22 million to 34 million to 61 million. Just because you have this arbitrary deadline that means nothing. So we should, I think we need to fix this approach. Why fund to 2040 when it's that's just an arbitrary deadline. So again, contributions today way too low. Contributions in the 2030s, way too high. So the only proposed solution that's come out of Springfield so far is to make 2040, 2050. Let's defer it 10 years. What happens in that case? Well, you're reducing your current contribution, but you're making the pain much worse.
It's
So
just the kicking the can down.
yes, you've kicked your can down the road again. This was the case, you know, it used to be 2033. I don't know that I can do that. No, I can't. It used to be 2033, then they moved it to 2040. Now they're considering moving it to 2050. And that it doesn't solve anything. It just makes the problem way worse. So you do get, the city would get some momentary budget relief. Now their contribution would become $9.8 million. But in 2020, 2050, I can't even, I got to go to the numbers and say that, okay, my contribution in 2050 is now 34. So you're going from 9 million to $34 million under that proposed solution, right? There's nothing it's solving. It's just making the problem worse. People just don't know it yet. They'll figure it out in 10, 15 years from now. But, well, people know it. They're just putting their head in the sand. I mean, that's really probably the more appropriate answer. So that's not a solution. It's just kicking the can down the road. It's taking credit. It allows the city to take credit for a $35 million contribution that they're going to make in 2045, and allows them to make a $9 million contribution today. That it just doesn't make any sense. So but again, this 2050 approach is why, why are we, the benefit payments are going on for, 70, 80 years from this point. Go ahead.
You can change it to 80%, because that's also what the proposed too.
Oh,
It just seems 90 days right there. That devastating thing.
Yeah. So if you change it to 80%, now you get an $8 million contribution in 2023, but in 2050, you have a $44 million contribution. And oh, by the way, you still have, yes, and you still have 100. I mean, after that $44 million contribution, you still have $108 million of unfunded liability. And if I just go to the total contributions versus where we are today, that approach increases the city's contributions by $152 million, and you still have $108 million of unfunded liability left. So kicking the can to 2050 and keeping it at 90% is bad enough. Reducing it to 80% really gives the plan no chance to succeed. Okay, so about this target, this 80%, 90% target, I can see that there's no reason that the plan needs to be at 100% at any point in time. However, the contributions need to be based on the entire unfunded liability, because if it's not, you end up with this kicking the can down the road approach. So an approach that could make some sense is to change from a closed amortization, having this arbitrary end date, to let's go to ongoing funding. We're gonna contribute to this plan over the next 100 years. Let's design a funding policy that reflects that. And so in open amortization, you'll see if we have a 15-year open amortization, that means, first of all, this is the approach that IMRF is going to. And
Well, not going, this is what they have.
Well, yeah, but they're not quite at 15 years yet.
Yeah.
They're phasing down.
They were at 20, now they're going to 15, they're phasing down.
Yes, they're going from 20 to 19, which you could do. We're at a 20-year amortization. Even if they kicked it to 2050, you could say, well, we're not going to use 2050. We're going to continue to phase down to this 15-year period. And then once you get to the 15-year period, you stay at 15 years. And so every year there's a 15-year amortization. And so you're never, you're to the point of not reaching, you're never going to be at 100% unless the returns and you have a lot of actuarial gains. But what it does is it creates a better funding approach. And if we go back to, looking at this alternate approach, you'll see that your unfunded liability every year is being paid down. It's 159 now, the 156, 150, 140, 134, 131, and you're always paying down the unfunded liability. And that's important. So that's why, if I go to a 20-year, you're not really, the unfunded liability isn't really being paid off at all. You have the initial gains, those investment gains that are being reflected. And then you'll see it's 140, 139.8, 130. So while 20 years it's not allowing the unfunded liability to grow, it's not eliminating the unfunded liability either. And so that's why, I think 15 years is the appropriate, the most appropriate period of time. It's not, if you go to 10 years, well, then there's still some volatility that's sort of inherent. If you go to 15 years, it's long enough where if I have a, let's just go back to our prior example where we had negative 20% in 2038. And you remember how it took off like a space shuttle. Well, there's a significant increase that you should expect if you have a 20% loss. But it's at least somewhat, you have the possibility of it being manageable, where going from whatever was 30 million to 60 million, that's not something that was possible. Here there's going to be a lot of pain, but it's potentially something that could be managed. And so just like I said earlier about how I think today's contributions are too low, well, you're solving that, right? It's gonna, in order to get there, you're gonna take a hit, because now you've gone from 20 years down to a 15-year amortization. You could phase it in over time as well, and that's it's not something that I can do right here, but you could get there over time. And then, since you are eating into your unfunded liability every year, your payments are no longer increasing. Under the current approach, your unfunded liability is going up, and you need larger and larger contributions every year. Well, now you satisfied that. You have a larger contribution today, you're eating into your unfunded liability, and now your payments are actually going down over time as you increase or decrease your unfunded liability. Your funded ratio, you're no longer getting to 90% by 2040, but the funded ratio at any point in time, I don't really care what it is. What I care about is, if there's unfunded liability, are we getting rid of it? And if we are, to me, that is much better than having these arbitrary goals that are impossible to hit. And so here you'll see by the end of the period, we're approaching that 90% funded that has the pension code has as its goal. But as I said, we're not funding to 90%. So, under the current approach, the contributions are low, and then they increase over time. And if everything goes according to plan, on that very last day, we're going to be 90% funded. Well, you can't have your ultimate goal. You can't fund to that goal and have it be reached on the very last day. In order to achieve a 90% funded ratio, you really need to fund that entire amount. And then over time, you approach that amount. And since you always have a 15-year amortization, that's how you get to that 90%. We're not going to get to 100%. We're always going to have this 15-year amortization. And so just naturally you get to that 90%. They're trying to force this 90% target when, but they're going about it all wrong. You need to have fund to the entire amount, but then have ongoing funding. And then that sort of naturally gets you to that 90% goal that they're targeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That kind of makes sense. So right now under state law, we have to be 90% funded by 2040. Can we put in 17 years instead of 15 and see what that would look? That's essentially what we have left of the period from now until 2040.
Yep.
So the payment last year was for the city was 12.1, I think $12.1 million. Not, well, that was what we said they should have paid. But how much would the payment be in the estimated 17 years, 90% funded of an open amortization be? What would the city's payment be?
So when there's an open amortization, there's no 90%.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay, sorry,
that's
yeah, but it's a 17. I'm sorry. 17
yeah.
year period.
Yes. So what would the
What
initial
would the
payment be?
yeah, the initial payment be,
Well, it would go to 15.5 million.
and then under the current law, 2040, 90% closed amortization, 15.5. Because this is really what we're asking the city to put in today for to fund our pension funds pretty much forever. So 15.5 at this example.
Yep.
And then at 2040 closed, 90% funded.
It's 12.1.
It's what?
That's 12.1.
It's 12.1.
So it's about $3.5 million
Yeah.
difference,
Okay.
or 3.4.
And that will, the 15.5 will start going down in the open.
Yes. Yep.
And the 12.1 will continue to go up. And eventually those two lines will cross.
Yep. And you'll see here it's crossing
Right
in
there.
2028. They're essentially the same.
So we're talking 6 years of savings by the current plan, but 2040, 90%. But eventually it's going to cost them more. So we have about a 6-year period that they're going to have to pay a little more money.
Yeah. And this, this open approach, really solves those issues that I talked. Okay, it takes a little bit more, but now we have a lot less. But we're going to be paying, we're going to be paying more out here. But make no mistake, this red line is theoretical. You're never gonna, there's 0% chance. And as an actuary, I don't like to say that, but there's 0% chance that we're going to follow this red line and, get to the $28 million contribution and then fall to a $6 million contribution. So looking at this and saying, well, it's going to cost us more I'm trying to create a model that's realistic. And this current approach is not realistic. It's not sustainable. And so having something that is sustainable and realistic, I think is extremely important, but it also has to be effective. And that's why that 20-year amortization, that 20-year open, that's too long of a period, because look, your contribution, you're only your funded ratio isn't getting high enough. Your unfunded liability is not being drawn down enough. And so 15 is the answer. We don't have to go to 15. We don't need to get to 15 overnight, but we can phase into it. But I think that's ultimately where you want to be. I guess a 20-year open amortization would be fine if we're using the level dollar approach. And so if I change that to 0%, you'll see that, meaning that we know we're taking all of the deferral, that we're going to contribute the same amount. There's no increase at all. You'll see that under a 15-year, well, that's probably too big of an increase, right? You're going to $20 million. So if we're using a level dollar approach, now we're getting to that same, 15, that's a little bit, 17 million, so it's a little bit higher. But I guess the point of this is, if 15 years is we have to look at all sort of facets of the amortization approach. The period of time is one of them, but the level dollar versus level percentage of payroll is the other. And so if, like, if they want to, a lot of people say, well, we should use 30 years. Well, that's, if it's 30 years and it's level dollar, well, maybe that's, that's not terrible just looking at it. But if we go back to the 30 years with level percentage of payroll, that's, your funded ratio is, your contributions going up, because again, if you look at, you've locked in perpetual negative amortization in this case. You'll see you're 154, 156, your unfunded liability is increasing every single year. And you're back to the same situation that we're in now, where you have negative unfunded liability. And so, 15 years, open amortization, level percentage of payroll, to me, that seems like sort of that seems like the sweet spot to me. If you want to change to 20 years, well, we got to make some other changes elsewhere, because keeping everything else the same and just changing it to 20 years doesn't work for me. Okay, any questions? Anybody on Zoom? Don't be shy.
Tell me again, if you would please, what is the number in 2040? If nothing changes, if the 2040 date stays the same, the 90% stays the same, and the city's contribution stays the same, what does the number become in 2040?
The contribution number is 28 million, 28.2. And like I said, currently it's at 12.0. So more than doubles from here. Actually, 24. Yeah, it increases 133% from where we are. Anything else, Joe? I mean, any other things you want to address?
Logistically, I think I would leave with the final part of our discussion.
Yeah, so just like can you recap like what your approach, certainly for what IMRF does, what your defined benefit plan does for your company, and how you guys really do it? And I would just kind of stick with IMRF, because that's what we've always compared to. Everything for the last 20 years of my sitting on this council is like, why is IMRF doing so well? And then I'm really upset, really with myself, for not pushing this issue, being a part of it. But I do want to be a part of the solution, because this can kicking is it's going to happen again and again and again. And I've had council members say, we care about the future of the city of Peoria. We want our families to live here. Well, then solve this problem.
Yeah.
Because this problem is $1 today, $10 tomorrow. Well, that started 25 years ago. That dollar yesterday is $25 today. I mean, so we have the ability now to do this. We're well educated at this board, and we have the ability. And I understand the money, and I've heard all those complaints. We don't have the money, but if we don't have the money today, are we really going to have the money tomorrow? And we're not. I mean,
it's not just the money. It's the money compounded for 20 years.
Yes.
And that makes it.
So I guess what I try to do is that 15.5 million, what the city will have to pay, which is another 3.4 million, what they are paying today. But by 2028, that number will actually start going down. They will start paying less. Mm-hmm. So if we figure the next 6 years, they're going to have to come up with $18-20 million for this fund, they will start seeing a savings. I mean, so kind of give a summary of like.
Yeah. So what I'll start with the 90% by 2040. I'll talk about the proposed solution, the 90% by 2050, and then talk about the IMRF approach.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll switch.
Yeah. So, so, yeah, I think, so for the people watching, just kind of go over that, what we, just summarize it all up together, what we talked about, and then what we as a board, your recommendation as a board, we should kind of really educate the council to.
Okay.
Hey, Jason.
So you want me to do that now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then
Okay.
it's
Just,
recorded, and then everybody.
okay. So ultimately, what,
Jason.
like I said, my recommendation is that we move towards an ongoing funding approach where we don't have these target dates. Let's have the funding of the plan match the payments that are going to be made to the members. And that's going to happen not just until 2040, not just until 2050. It's going to happen for the long term. Let's move to that type of funding. And so by doing so, it takes a larger contribution today to start eating into that unfunded liability. It creates a more stable and predictable contribution pattern. And your contributions, since you're eating into your unfunded liability, your contributions don't increase over the time. They actually decrease over the time. And I think the most effective way to do that is to get to a 15-year open amortization. And once we're there 10 years from now, maybe we make a change, maybe we lower it to 10 years or but ultimately let's get to 15-year open amortization. That creates a contribution pattern that I described. It has larger contributions today, but it does pay down the unfunded liability and reduces the contributions over time. And this is the approach that IMRF is using. And so from that perspective, that's what's good enough for IMRF. It should be good enough for police and fire funds across the state. Okay,
Yeah.
You're welcome. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, one was we can't hear the audio now. Thank you. This was helpful information. And then can you elaborate on what it means to phase into a 15-year open? Yes. So what I mean by phasing in, currently, we're funding to 2040. So I guess we have 18 years left in our amortization payments. So rather than going from 18 years to 15 years overnight, which that's really what's creating this spike up, is now we have a shorter mortgage, right? So when you have a shorter mortgage, it's going to take a higher payment. And so rather than doing that overnight, we could say, well, we're going to continue on the same path that we're on. Next year, it'll be 17, then 16, and then 15 years. And then once you get to 15 years, you keep it at 15 years rather than extending it to 35 years or whatever, whatever they're going to do with, or 25 years, whatever they're going to do with the legislation by making it 2050 or some other date. So, what would happen here is that, we would, for the next, if we phased in for the first 3 years, we would, sort of be on the same line, but then we would go up, and then we would see, a line that shifts upward slightly just because we didn't have quite as much money going in. And this, like I said, this isn't something that needs to happen today. So that's why a 3-year phase in to get to 15 years, I would be perfectly fine with that. So that's what I mean by phasing in. It's just, going 18, 17, 16, and then once we get to reach 15 years, keep it there. Okay.
My only suggestion to you, and I'm not commenting on your presentation, perhaps it's me, but my vision is such that I can't read a single number on that screen. So I see the lines. Just make sure you say the numbers out loud.
Okay. Yeah.
I can see the lines, but.
And yeah. And so, I mean, I've tried to make this, so the lines are really what's important. But yeah, I will make sure to, yeah. Yep.
That's the showstopper.
Yep.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Just need a motion to receive and file. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Okay, all right. Thank you, Jason.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for everybody else.
Thank you, Jason. I mute my unit now. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Is there any citizens willing to, or had any questions or opportunity to speak? Okay. No executive session, need a motion to adjourn? So move second, all in favor? Aye. All right. Thanks, everyone.